Okay, so we're going to continue off where we left off in part one, and we're going to do it a little differently, at least in this one, as far as we're going to go ahead and ink the rest of Thor in before we start coloring him. In the first part we did kind of a piece by piece procedure, but on this one we are going to go ahead and ink the rest of him in. As you can tell, I still have the time lapse going here to kind of speed this up because again, now this section actually was well over 2 hours long in real time, but by using the time lapse, I've cut that down to just a little over 30 minutes, which was not bad, if, actually, if you ask me. Uh, I'm using the curve tool a lot here because these are some pretty much standard outside lines, and the curve tool actually works probably best here, at least as far as for someone on my control. So I'm just pretty much following the contours of again of Jack's pencil lines, using the curve tool to get this lined up so that we can then go back in there and do the coloring of it. Just as before, I said I wish I could draw as fast as this thing makes it look like it's going. Uh, like I said, once you get the curve tool used to it, like I said, it does go pretty quick. Not this quick, but especially for outside lines or lines that require, you know, some uniformity to them. The curve tool is a good tool to use. Okay, so now that we've got that, we're going to go ahead and pick a spot. We're going to start with the strap of the hammer, and I'm going to make that look kind of the brownish leather look. And same technique as we've been using for all of these, using the shadow of the airbrush to darken in the edges, and then the light of the highlighter to bring out some shine to it. I'm going to finish this little piece of the hammer that didn't get finished. Okay, going to keep right on moving now to the helmet. Again, same technique of selecting, filling in with color, and then shading with the airbrush. Probably I'm going to end up darkening that his helmet. Yeah, darkening that in a little bit. Gives it a nice metallic shine to it. I'm going to end up doing the sleeve. Okay, so now we're going to do the arm and the hand. We'll go back in after the fact and add in the ink lines to it. Alright, now we're just adding the base colors. Do his other hand here. Like I said, as far as the shading goes, I'm not, I'm just kind of just following my own accord. I don't have any set way I'm doing it. I'm just kind of going at it, assuming where light's going to go as far as on the hand. Okay, so now I'm going in here and using the Kolinsky brush to fill in some of the lines. Like I said, I use the curve tool for main outside lines, but then use the actual ink brush in for more detailed lines, especially as far as the ink lines go on the arms and such. Okay, in the past that we've used the ink brush using black ink. So, well, you can do the same thing here, especially on the ink drawing with white. So I'm basically just taking that same ink brush but using white. So I'm filling in some lines on the black, give it a little more detail. So it usually looks pretty good, especially on the black. So you can experiment with that, especially like on a dark surface, kind of see what kind of effects you can get from the different brushes. So adding in the ink lines on the helmet and the feathers on the wings on his helmet, and then we'll end up going in here and doing the ink lines, probably filling in a little bit of the darkness on his throat, on his sleeve. And now start working on his arm. Like I said, these are much easier to add away from the color. In fact, over the color, because like I said, if you put the ink down first and then have to color in between the spaces, that gets to be problematic. You can do it, but it's just hard. So we've almost got Thor completely colored. Just got his cape and his leg to finish. Ink in this spot on his leg. Okay. Shading in his leg and the blue on his back. Added a little more of the line detail again. Okay, gonna match up the color from the first boot to the second boot. And shading that in, and then we'll go in behind there once we put the highlights in. Get the ink brush and go ahead and put in the lines for the foot. And follow along Jack's ink lines there. Okay, so now we're going to start on the monster's hand, and I started out with this using the curve tool, but as I progressed through it, I pretty much found that it was probably easier because of so many different lines and curves on this to eventually just go ahead and just use a straight pen. So I said started out with the curve, but as you can see now, I just went straight to the pen and using it to fill in all the lines and any of the shadows as I'm going. And it said because I could explode, increase it in size, I was able to have fairly reasonable control of where I put the line. So that's pretty much what I did for this. Revolving the picture is necessary to make it a little more comfortable to put in the lines. And of course, again, we are using the time lapse, so naturally I didn't draw this as fast as it's appearing here. But same thing in this case, it's still set for actually 30 as far as the brush thickness, and work quite nicely for the hand. Now, because this one has a whole bunch of different sections on it, when it comes time to color it, it's going to require a number of different selections holding down the shift key to make sure I cover every part of that hand, because uh, many of the lions have kind of made self-contained cells on the hand, so it will require a number of different selections to complete that colorization of the hand. Alright, so now I'm just adding that bottom line, so so when I add the color doesn't try to bleed off anywhere. Okay, now I'm using the select tool to select the hand for color, and as I said, I'm having to, you can see the little box saying when I press the shift key to let you know that I had to do that a number of times to keep the selections going. Now, what you don't see here is the first time I tried to color it, it bleeded off into the other sections because again I had some open lines, which is what I just did there. Is I went in there and completed some of the open lines that I had, so the color didn't bleed off. So yeah, giving a close examination, make sure I didn't have any open spaces, because all it takes is one open space for the color not to go where you want it to. Okay, so here we go again, selecting all the pieces, so I can go ahead and add the color to the hand. Again, because I had to separate them into sections, that's why it's going a little piece at a time. And also allowed me to realize which areas that I had not selected before, so I can go back again, pressing the shift key to add in those sections that I missed, so I can make sure every spot gets colored. Okay, now I'm going in with the airbrush and doing the shading along the outside edges. Darkening those edges a little bit. This one actually, when in doing the green, I thought it was still a little blasé. So after adding the highlights, I ended up adding a little bit of a yellow tint to it to give it a little more, make it not quite as dull. And that worked out relatively well. Gave it just a little bit of other color to it other than the green or variations of the green. So now I'm going in here and just trying different ink lines, different brushes, trying to see something that I like. Okay, so I was exploring these different lines, trying to find things that I kind of liked. Now I've kind of settled on one, and also when I'll go in here and again add just a little more shading to it. And also, as I've done it, I've kind of noticed that I got a little bleed off some of my airbrush work. So what I'm doing now is going in with the eraser and just cleaning up some of those edges. Not exactly sure exactly why that happened. Because I had it selected, it shouldn't have done that. But regardless, it's a quick cleanup with the eraser to where some of those that paint had kind of bled off. Now I'm adding in some of that yellow I was talking about, just trying to give it a little pop to it. And that's looking pretty good. And now I'm finishing up the rest of his cape that I left off from before. Which is a pretty quick process. sample off from the red on the previous red I used to fill in for, make sure the cape kind of matches. Re-emphasizing my lines there a little bit. And select those so I can color them in. And same procedure, add the shading and the highlights to it. Okay, so got that taken care of. Now I'm going to go ahead and ink in the other part of the hand over here. Same thing, just using the brush, not using the curve tool for this, just freehanding over the blue lines. And while I'm at it, we'll start inking in a little bit of my man here behind Thor. Looks like he's trying to waylay him with looks like a pick or some kind of a weapon. This one as well, I'm just using the pen tool to do, rather than using the curve or anything like that. See, okay, so you notice there, I was trying to rotate it around. You have to be careful because I'm using separate layers. So if when I'm trying to move something, if I grab the wrong one, in that case I move the ink line layer. Of course, you can undo that and put it back where it belongs, but it's really easy when you're using separate layers to grab the wrong layer and move it when you didn't really want to move it. So it's just something to be aware of as you're working on different layers and trying to move things around to make sure that you have kind of control and you're doing what you want to do and not accidentally moving something that you weren't ready to move. Now I'm inking in the man's face here. Yes, and of course, we've talked about accidentally moving the ink layer. I have, and as we have discussed in previous lessons, I have the same problem occasionally when I'm applying my color, applying it to the ink layer as opposed to the color layer, which sometimes I don't even realize that's happening until I start shutting down different layers to view the process that I'm working on, and suddenly notice that my ink layer has spots of color on there. So then I end up having to go back and undo those areas. Of course, if I were to, when I finish, just go ahead and merge all the layers together, then it really wouldn't probably matter. And theoretically, when you are totally done with the drawing and ready to maybe print it out, you probably would go ahead and merge your layers. I tend to try to leave them separate because I never know when I might decide to go back and maybe correct something or change something that on second and third perusal I didn't particularly care for originally. So I mean, again, that's totally a personal choice of what you want to do or how you want to do it. Like I said, I tend to leave the layers separate for the most part. So I'm just continuing to add the ink lines in. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go and color in his other hand here. I'm not exactly even sure who exactly this monster is. His hands kind of look like the old Fing Fang Foom character, and I believe he was created by Jack Kirby. But that's kind of what his claws look like. But I really have no idea exactly who this is supposed to be, and probably doesn't really matter actually. Uh, I'm doing it in his other claw now that since I had it inked, and again, kind of just using the first one as a uh, guideline for me as far as coloring wise and ink wise what I'm doing. Uh, I'm also, because his claw is extending over Thor's boot, I'm adding a little bit of a shadow from where the claw is over his boot. Again, that's something you don't have to do. It's probably the anal attention to detail person in me, even if it's not really necessary. So now I'm just going in here and coloring in the ground underneath his feet. I mean, I'm doing really bold work here. I'm just putting in a light green, but then I can go in with the pen and just go ahead and throw some blades of grass in. Uh, where Jack lays them out, or anywhere else I want to put them. And of course, like I said, once you put the color back on, they'll show back up. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and ink in that tree that's behind Thor's cape here. Again, just using the pen, following the lines. Again, I'm not being real careful, not being real detailed with it. Basically, just finishing up what remains to be inked, really. So then I can go in and finish the coloring on it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do this man's face. I guess because his eyes were closed, I didn't have to worry about leaving the eyes open. And the mouth was already enclosed, so I was able to leave that alone. And so just throwing in shading on his face wherever, to me, it makes sense that it lays. Now I'm doing his beard, just throwing a brown, a little bit of shading, and then I'll throw in the ink over his beard. Okay. Now coloring in some of the man's armor. And I didn't really have any guide to tell me what color his armor was, so I'm just throwing in whatever color I think might work for me here. In this case, it's like a light purple. Very stylish of the man, actually, I must say. It's a bold color choice. And again, same old as far as once I lay the color in, the technique and procedure is the same. Okay, so I'm just going to continue on with his armor. Again, just picking colors that'll kind of go with the lovely purple that I picked out for him. I mean, of course, the man's wearing a skirt, so I mean, I don't know why purple should be a problem for it. Maybe I shouldn't say that to one of the guys carrying a really pointy pickaxe hammer thing, but the fact of the matter is Thor is the star of the show anyway, so I don't know that it really matters what color costume the guy behind him is wearing. See, again, you saw where I accidentally, when trying to make my selections, clicked on the wrong thing and it selected all the ink lines. It's probably why I should have probably enlarged the picture so I got a little more, gave myself a little more room to make my selections without doing it when it was so small, because that's just asking for me to, just like I keep doing there, selecting the wrong thing. So normally I would probably go ahead and just cut that out of the video, but it's kind of maybe important for you to see what can happen when you're trying to select the wrong piece. And apparently I must really enjoy doing it because I just keep doing it. Okay, here, getting close to finishing this thing up. So I initially is making, the area where his hammer is swinging just a variation of the same blue that's in the sky. I'm almost thinking that I'm going to end up changing my mind about that and maybe just make it white. Of course, it would also help if I'd stop trying to select all the ink lines and not just the ones I want. I'm going to put somebody in an epileptic seizure. Okay, so now I'm coloring in his weapon. Yeah, I'm gonna keep doing that. I actually was having my issues around then selecting only the pieces I want. Okay, so putting in the shading there, and I'll need to go ahead and throw in some ink lines. That's where I use one of my other brushes to do those ink lines in. Okay. I think I was just getting tired here because I was getting really sloppy as far as my selections go. Okay, this is where I'm kind of experimenting with the ink lines for his weapon. I'm about doing about as many different mistakes as I possibly can here toward the. See, it's what happens when you're doing this half asleep right after work. Okay, so that's actually those ink lines aren't too bad. I kind of like those, so I'm probably gonna leave those. Okay, so we're just about to the end of this piece. Throwing in some ink lines on his skirt, just playing around with the different pens on basically all different areas of the drawing. See, I still need to color in that tree. Just throwing a real imaginative light brown on the tree there. Go ahead and add the shading in to the tree. Okay. Just throwing in a few extra ink lines into the tree. And we're just about done with this piece. Might have been done a little sooner had I not gotten so sloppy toward the end with my lines, but of course, like I said, that's where undo is always is your closest friend. So when I'm going to here strengthening the lines on these swings, because like I said, I think I'm going to take that blue out of there and just leave it white, you know, along the lines of where his hammer is swinging. And to do that, I got to make sure that that I've got an enclosed space to color in. Okay, so that about does it for the most part. Looks pretty good. Gotta do. Oh, I've got his handle there on his weapon. That's a quick fix though. While I'm in here, go ahead and add some extra ink lines to his glove or gauntlet, I guess in this case. Okay, so all we got left is his handle on his weapon. Color that in, shade it, highlight it. And we're probably going to end up throwing a few more ink lines here and there around the man's arm. And that'll pretty much finish Jack Kirby's Thor. Hopefully you got a little bit something out of this one. And because we're about done with it. We'll pull back a bit. But there we go. So this is Art and Sexton, and we'll catch you next time on Artist Corner.